velocity-based training. Sounds sexy. Sounds like something only athletes do. Well, you're not wrong, but there are different ways that you can utilize it, athlete or not. And we're going to talk about what you can do with that.
So we're here with Conor Gettemy to talk about VBT. And I was actually really surprised by this when we had talked offline, because I was like, why don't I know about this? Probably because I'm not working as a strength and conditioning coach in an athletic setting, work with general population. But let's dive into some real tangible reasons why this could be really important for non-sports, sports-based settings, athletic settings, just kind of your general population exerciser.
Sure. But I'll give you the three bullet points. I'll come back to the first one. So, eliciting a specific training adaptation would be point number one. Point number two would be auto-regulation, which I'll get to in a moment. And then the third would be immediate feedback and driving intent. So I'll start with the first one, eliciting specific training adaptations. If you're a weekend warrior and you still, play some sort of organized sport, or even if you don't, maybe you're just an Olympic lifter or a power lifter, or you still, you're still tracking numbers or tracking metrics. You still care about performance, quote unquote. This is what would appeal to you guys. If I have just described you, then you'll get something out of this. So, there's velocity-based training is essentially measuring either with a linear position transducer, which is quite literally something is attached to the weight. And then as it moves, it can tell how fast the weight is moving, or an accelerometer, which is wireless or Bluetooth. And so you might attach it to the bar. There's a strap that you could put on. But one way or the other, it's basically telling you this is how fast you move this weight. So there's ranges from above 1.3 meters per second is crazy fast. It's fast. And then all the way down to, if you're at 0, you're not moving the weight. So, 0.1 to 0.2 is like, this is a 1 rep max. And so there's a number of, I'll say there's 5 sort of subcategories within that, that can help you elicit a slightly different training adaptation. So starting strength is your 1.3 and above, which is I'm trying to go from a dead stop to fast as soon as possible. How propulsive can I be? There's speed strength and strength speed, which are kind of just a continuum of, like, if you want to think about speed strength, it's speed in the conditions of strength. So can I move this still pretty fast, but there's some load attached to it? And then strength speed is kind of the opposite. Like, this is heavy, but can I move it fairly quickly? Fourth would be accelerative, which you're moving a moderate to heavy weight as fast as possible. So you can think of that one as like a lineman, like an offensive lineman blocking. They're taking a big, heavy thing that's right in front of them, but they're still trying to move it as fast and explosively as possible in the opposite direction. And then absolute strength, just because you're measuring the velocity of it doesn't mean that it always has to be explosive. You can still utilize velocity in strength training. And so that's your 0.1 to 0.5 is these are grinders here, but we're still able to, define it by its speed. But secondarily, auto-regulation is the term that I use. It has to do with readiness. So on your 1 rep max, let's say your 1 rep max on back squat is 300 pounds. Your 1 rep max can fluctuate, has an 18% fluctuation on any given day. So I'm not saying that it's all over the place every single day, but you can have a couple of really good weeks in a row where you're getting great sleep, your diet's really good, you're living relatively stress-free, probably not a lot of fluctuation. But if after maybe those 3 good weeks, all of a sudden your girlfriend breaks up with you and you get 4 hours of sleep and you don't eat your last 2 or 3 meals, well, that 1 rep max is not going to be what it usually is. So a lot of times people will program with percentages. They'll say, I'm going to hit X number of reps at Y percentage, at 85%. Well, let's say 90, so the math's easy for me. If you're trying to hit 90% of your 300-pound max, that's 270. Let's say you hit that 300-pound max on day 1. Well, you're betting that on day 45, you're going to feel the exact same way you did. You're going to be just as ready on day 45 as you were on day one. Now, you could be way less ready. You could also be even better. You might have done that max when you weren't in that great of a brain space or great of a physiological space. So what the auto regulation aspect of VBT is it allows you a bit better of an idea of, well, just how hard should I go? Just how much should I be pushing myself here? As I'm sure everybody and their mother has gone to the gym expecting an awful day, whether you're sick, hungover, or anything in between, and somehow had an amazing day. And vice versa. It's like, okay, I'm ready to rip these weights and they don't even budge. So what I think is I think this is one of the more useful tools across all populations is it helps to give you somewhat of a quantifiable, somewhat objective measure of here's how well my body's actually performing. So if I know that I can move 225 at 0.8 meters per second, and as I warm up to 225, I get to 185 and I'm not even touching 0.8. I'm already at 0.6 or 0.7 despite my best efforts. Then I know, hey, maybe I'm just shot today. Maybe I just keep it low and keep it light. The only pitfall with that, or the only drawback is that is assuming you're actually trying your best. Like I can move 135 at 0.1 meters per second, but we know I'm sandbagging it. So the presupposition that you're, actually trying your hardest and trying to move the bar as fast as possible is one of the more important things to keep in mind when you're talking about auto regulation. Thirdly, and this is kind of the most fun one, again, a very applicable, very, very applicable across pretty much all populations, but it's driving intent and it's giving you instant feedback. So that what I liken it to is that carnival game where you have a big hammer, you smash the thing, and then the light goes up. Those exist for a reason. They're fun. They're competitive. Everybody gets a rise out of it. Everybody in the room can instantly see how well did or how well did I do or how well didn't I do. So it just makes training more fun. Which the more fun you're having during training, the more you look forward to it. The higher the likelihood is that you're consistent and you can sustain it. And the higher the likelihood you make progress. But then also that instant feedback, it helps improve your performance. Like it'll straight up tell you, no, that wasn't a good rep. If you're trying to become as explosive as possible, if you're trying to be the fastest, off the line, let's say, that there's a quantifiable range of speeds at which you must be moving in order for that adaptation to then be elicited. So instead of just, did that move, was that fast enough? I don't know. It looked pretty fast. It felt pretty fast. You could apply an actual number to it and see, well, I'm in range. Great. I'm going to keep moving. I'm not in range. I need to take weight off despite maybe I think it's fast enough. It either is or it isn't. So those three, you can delve quite a bit further into it. I will say, I'm not the foremost expert on it. I utilize it quite a bit with my athlete. If any of those three things pique one's interest, or if after this you want to know more, Brian Mann, I think it's BRYANMANN. If you Google his name, VBT, you'll instantly get, a million different pieces of literature, and he'll expand on it to a much better degree than I will. But that's sort of your general overview of some of the practical uses of it.
I mean, it's excellent. I mean, it pulled me in, especially just when we were talking about it in our kind of production meeting about this. I was like, wow, this is interesting. And I'm always thinking, how can I better assess feelings about a session? And I think the auto regulation part is certainly probably the most interesting one for me personally, and understanding readiness. And I think all trainers or service providers working with other humans want to understand how to best assess readiness. What can we actually get done today? And what are we not going to get done today based off of all those factors you mentioned, stress in life, sleep habits, nutritional habits, all those things. And so we could dive into that. But I think what's an interesting extension of this conversation is what happens when you're telling an athlete or a recreational exerciser, based off this information, we have to scale it back. And particularly athletes, in your mindset, how do athletes take that when you tell them, you may feel great, but it doesn't look great, honestly. And the metrics are telling us that, and we need to do something different.
I think that by and large, it's an advantage. Like you'll still get your athletes that they they could be at a 1%. Like their ankle could be hanging off at the skin, and they're like, "Oh, I'm good. Like let's rip it. I'm fine." But I think the quantifiability and the objectiveness of it, I'll put it this way: if you didn't have that, and by some other metric, you just by looking at the athlete, let's say you've been working with them for 3 years, and they start to warm up, and you just take one look at them, and you're like, you're toast. Like this does not, you're not moving this well. The bar's not popping like it usually does. I can usually hear the weights moving on the bar. It's not like, there's a lot of other subjective measures that you, as a reasonably seasoned professional working with somebody that you've been working with for a while, in your head, oh, this isn't going to be a good session if you keep pushing it like this. Yeah. It's one thing if it's in your head, and it kind of sucks that all you have to go off of is, no, trust me, you shouldn't do that today. Then yeah, like you kind of run into an athlete that's like, no, but I still want to, or like says who, or, you don't really have that objective measure. You don't really have like, it's not because I said so, it's because the iPad said so. Now, what I'll say is, I just mentioned, like, sometimes you'll walk into the weight room and feel like total crap and somehow have a great day. So I'm actually, I'm very, very glad that stuff like this, or, a little less relevant, but like a Whoop bracelet, or, your Apple Watch or whatever it is, I can see where I'm glad it exists. And the more metrics that we're able to gather, the more data that we're able to gather, the more informed decisions we can make about how hard we should push somebody, and readiness and all that. But I don't know if we'll ever be able to get all the way down to and scientify I'm just going to send it today. And it works. Like sometimes it'll, against all odds and against all metrics and objectivity, somebody will just have an amazing day because they just did. So I think by and large, it's to kind of come back to your question. It empowers a coach to say, this is it's my opinion that you shouldn't do this, but let me at least, give you, here's some ammunition, like, here's what's backing this up. So it might make that ultra competitive athlete, at least feel a little bit better. Like, okay, like it's not personal. He's not doing this because he doesn't trust me or doesn't have faith in me. Like he's making an informed and educated decision.
Yeah. I identify with this so much, Conor, because I can't tell you how many times I have gone to work out and I'm like, I do not feel great. Like, and then I have a great workout. And I was a collegiate athlete as well. And I remember I was a track athlete, and there's many times when you go out to track practice and you're like, I'm pretty sure I don't have it today. Yeah. And you do have it. And I think it's just a weird place to be. And I talked to a lot of my clients about it. They go, oh, no, not feeling great, and all these kind of subjective things, and they're inside their body. Now I always tell them, well, we actually don't know whether you're going to perform well all the time, because this measure you have of your personal feelings about your body may not actually be accurate. And it's a weird thing to tell people, because they're like, I know my body, or they think they know what's happening. But there's so many variables that go into feeling ready for a workout. Yeah. And so I think you're right. It may be very difficult to get down to the penultimate, like, hey, we're going to do this test and it's going to give us a green or red light. We're not doing this today, or we do. That's going to be really hard to do, I think.
Yeah. To add on to that, like the word perception, it is, that's the subjectivity of it. Of like, I perceive myself as tired, or I perceive this set as difficult. Like, RPE is obviously a really, really, it's a useful training tool with an experienced lifter. So like if I'm training somebody one-on-one, I can use RPE with them, because I have the time to have a conversation with them. And their seasoned enough and well trained enough that they know their body well. But as I'm sure you know, like if somebody tells you it's an RPE 9 and you're like, dude, you had like 8 more in the tank.
Yeah.
Let like you weren't even that wasn't even an RPE 3. So like a lot of times people will kind of equate, okay, it's starting to burn, that's failure, as opposed to true, honest, my muscles aren't doing the thing anymore. So again, that's another like, that's a useful tool, not to denigrate those people. They just don't have a great idea of what difficult actually is. And so that's kind of a good teaching tool of, hey man, like this screen's right in front of your face. The weight might feel heavy. It might be scary. It might burn. You never want to push somebody through something irresponsibly, but you can kind of use that as a tool to be like, hey man, you're still killing it. Like keep going. You're doing great. It might even reinforce them and give them the confidence of, oh wow, you're right. Like I'm still moving this thing at 0.8. It's not even close to failure.
Yeah. I like that usefulness of a teaching tool about kind of like how you feel about your own readiness and effort. So you're talking about like a seasoned exerciser or athlete. What's really interesting in general population is you're getting a lot of deconditioned, sedentary, brand new exercisers. And this tool could be useful as an additional metric to teach sedentary or new exercisers how to understand feeling in their body. Because often new exercisers are not, it sounds weird to say, they don't really know their own body cues. It's kind of like knowing when you're hungry or not. Sometimes people need to know, ask yourself, are you actually hungry? And it's almost a similar concept with training is like, if you don't know, like a really seasoned exerciser like yourself, myself, other people, when your body's off. You just know. You're like, man, this is a feeling. I felt this before, or this doesn't feel like homeostasis to me.
Yeah,
the new exerciser doesn't know that because honestly, they felt like trash for so long. They don't know what actually feeling good, feeling bad, really the delineation between that or training well means,
Yeah, any degree. And again, I want to make sure it's not coming off as like we're calling these people soft. We're just calling them inexperienced. They just you don't have the tools to comprehend. To all right now is it's sort of binary. It's a 1 or a 0. It either sucks or it doesn't. And so this is the teaching tool of like, here's how much it's allowed to suck until you actually have to stop. And in one of the ways that I prescribe, one of the ways that I utilize VBT is I don't even give a number of reps for the set. I say, keep going until you can't move it this fast. So it's not to say that they're going to go to actual failure. It's if I give you a weight that you can move at say 0.8, it's not particularly heavy, not super light either. But if I say, okay, I want you moving that weight until try as you might, you can't get above 0.5, that's going to be a grind. Like that's going to be a heavy, but it's still going to be far, far away from this is a dangerous rep that I'm attempting. So I think it's a good way to, again, as you said, like take that beginner and say, we're going to actually give you a visual medium to represent what fatigue actually is, as opposed to, well, you just, despite being completely inexperienced in gauging this, we need you to gauge it all of a sudden.
Yeah. I just love that because I've had so many clients throughout the years where even just a small amount of effort is like, well, this must be the end game. Like, oh, this is hard. Like, well, actually, technically, it's not really there yet. Before
I have the proof.
I have the proof.
No,
like you're telling me that maybe it's just that. Again, I'd like to just say we're not saying you're a wimpy or something. That's not it. Just maybe you just don't know how to read when you're feeling like this.
Yeah, it's you use it as a positive message. It's like it's not, dude, you're not even close in that sort of way. It's like, look how much left you still have to go. You're doing great. Like you've got so much left on the table that you can still go. And, I would say it's quite easy to make sure that you keep that with a positive spin, and you can use that to empower.
That's right. Yeah, I think so. But I think what's hard is that people feel this agency over their bodies. Like I'm inside my body. This is my body. Why I should know when I'm feeling like this. And it could be somewhat of a difficult kind of meeting yourself moment when you're like, well, maybe I don't know what this feels like. When you're getting sick, right? Everybody's like, oh, the scratchy throat starting to come. Oh, the stages of being sick because you've been sick before many times throughout your life. But if you've never exercised really, you actually don't know what the sequence of that feels like. So it's a teaching tools to start teaching you what that feels like. It's like if a quarterback has played for 15, 20 years, they've seen all the coverages. They know potentially what's coming. But that rookie quarterback's like, I've never seen that coverage. That's a really exotic blitz, maybe. And it's taking that to your own body, which can be really difficult to come to grips with, that this part of your body and giving effort, you're not actually very aware of what that means.
Yeah. It's just a matter of, well, aware is a great way to a great word to use, because all you're trying to do is, increase the amount of physical self-awareness that they have of like, here's what muscular failure actually feels like. Here's what, it's as with anything else, but I think your football example is perfect. You can't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
Never experience that sensation in your life, and then somebody says, okay, go until this sensation gets to be too much. Well, anything, like imagine like somebody never tasting sour in their life. And then for the first time you give them something, and then you say, okay, tell me when it's too much. I don't know. Like that's the first time I've ever experienced that. It's weird as hell. Like I don't know what a lot or a little is.
Yeah. I love that. I love that analogy too. It's so right on. And to me, it just starts moving towards just another metric or a way to assess how you're feeling in your body, which I think we just take for granted. Like for athletes, it seems pretty obvious. Like you need to know this training volume, contact time. Hey, this performance based, but also for the general population, it's also important for you to know your body and what's going on and how you feel. And also, can we get the necessary stimulus to start creating some changes here?
Right.
And your service provider, trainer, whoever is really just kind of guessing about that with you. A lot of the time, they're like, well, I don't know you that well, so I don't understand your super compensation levels. I don't actually have no clue what your sleep. So I'm learning all this information as we spend time together. And VBT sounds like a way to just add another way to start diving deeper into what is actually happening here.
Yeah, it's something that you can, I've been training for, I've been training myself for 20 years. I don't need, I still do. I track all my sets and reps. I write down my weight. But you could send me into any gym with nothing but my own bare hands, and I could auto-regulate myself to a specific T. And so, as you said, all this is doing is just adding a blueprint, so to speak. It's adding a visual medium, or at the very least, it's adding it. It's making the subjective objective, or at least more so. It's adding a bit of objectivity.
Right.
So if you're that person that doesn't know what sour tastes like, well, at the very least, it's like if you were to tell somebody, okay, well, if it gets to this, that's too much. Then at the very least, that person might not instantly have a perfect understanding of what's going on, but at least they have okay, I was told to stop if that happens, so I'm going to stop. So it gives them a bit of a guideline as opposed to just taking shots in the dark.
What are the responses to VBT from the athletes you work with? What do they say about
it? Universally positive. The one that jumps to mind immediately is there's some sports that the weight room is synonymous with it. Like if you play American football, if you play lacrosse, if you play volleyball, and you're not in the weight room, you're just automatically that's silly. That's not practicing.
Right.
As opposed to say tennis, soccer, cross country. There's some. Then I'll say this broadly. Maybe somebody could call me out on it, but there's no physical endeavor on earth that couldn't be somewhat improved by an appropriate amount of strength training. I'll even just say resistance training. Even cross country, we have a cross country team. They lift weights. So the most relevant example that I can think of for me personally is our women's soccer team. Very much on the one hand, they're like, we like the weight room. We know it. We know it's useful. We know it helps prevent injury. We know it helps increase performance. But on the flip side, they're also like, we need to perform for 90 minutes. And that's not me. Again, that's not me complaining about it. That's a very accurate observation. Like it's an aerobic. It's a very aerobically demanding sport. It's a very fatiguing sport. And if you wake up having accidentally gone too much, whether it's too much volume or too much intensity in the weight room, and you've got a game the next day, or you've got practice and you're worried about outperforming the person next to you, that's a valid concern. And so any team that we use it with likes it, but I would say they in particular have responded the best to it because they, as we said earlier, they like getting to just look at the iPad and like it's taken out of my hands. I can, instead of me telling them you should add some weight or you should go back, it's the iPad said it. Like the technology told you to do that. So I don't know why, but that just makes it a little more digestible of like, okay, it says I'm good, so I'm good. I'm going to keep going. Or okay, time to stop.
Gosh, I love that. That's pretty cool and such a valid point, especially with those type of sports where it's so cardiovascularly demanding. You can see how there could be some version of pushback about resistance training. It's like, well, is this going to actually, because the prevailing thought, obviously, like you said, is this is going to enhance your performance. But there's also from the athlete's mindset is maybe this could impact my performance negatively in this type of sport, which I think is an awesome conversation, actually.
Yeah, like, and that's why I want to make sure that like I reiterate that those concerns are valid in that, but it's not just unique to the weight room. It's generally speaking, yeah, I need to be cognizant of the amount of fatigue that I'm accumulating in the entirety of my lifestyle. So just sticking with the athlete, like, okay, I do this much practice, we play this many games. How much left? I know I need to perform some resistance training, if for no other reason than to just stay healthy. So I know I need to perform some amount of it, but I don't want to overdo that. Like medicine's good for you until you take too much of it. So what is the appropriate dose that I can give myself to where it's going to have a protective and an enhancing effect, as opposed to this just beat me down even further and now I'm worse off.
Do you ever have are those discussions between you and the coach pretty regular about the volume of training with the volume of training amongst all of the work that's being done?
Yeah. We on whether it's whether it's stopping by practice or sitting down and having a formal meeting or just, text, phone call, whatever it is. There are varying degrees. It really just depends on the sport coach. But there's varying degrees of, hey, what are you guys up to this week? I'll make sure to adjust accordingly. Because ultimately, like I'm a support staff member. It's their team. They're the head coach. So it is their decision how much of the cup they want to fill up. How much of the fatigue cup do they want to pour into it? That's entirely their discretion. Yeah. So what I can't do is, let's take it in a vacuum. If I were to just write, quote unquote, the best soccer program, whatever the volume, whatever the sets and reps are, let's just say it's X. That's all well and good. But if my sport coach, if our coach for that particular sport wants to, if X requires, I'm just coming up with random numbers here. If X requires 30% of that fatigue cup for the week, and my sport coach wants to use 90% because they just really want to hammer tactics and technique and all that. Well, I can't just say, well, let's go ahead and throw that whole thing at him. Like, I have to be the one that adjusts. They're here. They're not at our school to lift weights. They're at our school to get right and to play their sport. I exist to complement those things. So the first thing that needs to get adjusted is what they're doing off the field, off the court. And the biggest one of those things, the biggest fatigue generating thing off the court is likely going to be what they're doing in the weight room.
Yeah, that's true. Do you think makes me go down a rabbit hole of stuff real quick, but do you think there are better conversations happening between coaches, strength, just athletic coach, strength coach about the amount of volume athletes are having today versus yesteryear? Is it less volume, you think, now than previous athletes, or more or less? I'm curious about that, because when I was an athlete in the 90s, it was all about volume to the detriment of so many athletes. That fatigue cup you talked about was always at the max. Always. Is there different discussions today about that?
Just in my own experience, I would say so. I mean, I know right off the rip, I know half a dozen of our sport coaches, and myself included, have some type of readiness questionnaire that they give to their athletes of like, how are you doing? It's not to say that athletes' opinions dictate programming or that they dictate practice periodization, but I certainly think there's at least a greater acknowledgement that you can't just throw whatever you want at them and they'll adapt. Like they have to. Our women's tennis coach is a great example of this, because anytime he wants to condition the girls, he'll always shoot me a quick text just to get my opinion. He's like, hey, I planned on doing this. What do you think? Do you think this is good for tennis? Do you think this is good in general? Do you think the cost outweighs? Do you think the benefits outweigh the costs? Like, he's just the best example because he does it the most. But plenty of other times and in other seasons, coaches, it'll either be just a quick kind of consult like that, or it'll even be like, hey, you guys take care of that. Like they'll come to us and say, we're going to do this type of conditioning this many days each week over the course of our off season. Would you be willing, if we show you our practice plan, would you be willing to plan around that? So I do think that if you look hard enough, I'm sure you're still going to find your coaches that you would think they grew up in the 1960s, Alabama or Bryant era of like, okay, waters for cowards, so to speak.
Yeah.
But I think, like if you're going to compare it to now in a vacuum, is it really, really good and everybody's on point? No. And that's not a criticism of anybody at our school. We have very few, if any, injuries having to do with just straight up getting overworked. And if we do, they're mitigated very quickly. I've been here 6 years. At no point has anybody been like, these guys are soft or any sort of thing like that. It's always like, oh, okay. Like, what can we change up? What can we do to make sure that doesn't happen again? So could it be better? Certainly. But has it gotten better over the course of, however many yesteryears you want to go after? Yeah, I would say most definitely.
Okay. That's interesting. I wonder also, in adding to that, is there more emphasis on volume related to individual athletes' variation, or basically their ability to handle certain levels of volume at this point? Because I know in the past, often what happens is, you get in these groups, your team is all doing the same thing conditioning wise, but not taking into account that each athlete has different, levels of what they can handle of volume. Like treating everyone, is there more individual athlete variation when it comes to volume?
With me, or with strength conditioning, certainly, I can't speak for our sport coaches simply because I'm not around for them to be like, I'm not that in tune with their specific practice plans. What I will say is, I'm going to use our women's lacrosse team as a good example. Their this upcoming spring is their championship season. That's, they're in season. We have 57 girls. So there's going to be a wide variety of, some people are never going to see the field unless there's a bus accident. And then some are never going to come off the field. Right. Well, to your point, like, even if that's not to say that, to judge their willingness to work hard, but just straight up like, hey, we asked you to play every minute of a 60-minute game. This person stood on the sidelines and cheered. So the way that the program is going to get written moving forward in the spring is, just as an example, I'm going to tweak this a whole bunch, but let's say you put 4 sets of your main strength movement. Well, the first 2 are going to be, let's just call it red. And then the third one's going to be yellow and the fourth one's going to be green. And so it'll be, okay, if you are a high minute player, you owe me the 2 red sets and that's it. Bare minimum. If you subbed in, or if we come up with some threshold, if you played this many minutes, you owe me the red and the yellow. If you didn't play at all, you owe me all 4. So and then obviously they have full, I'm thinking of two girls right now that they could play all 60 minutes and they're going to do the green.
Yeah.
So even within that, they'll still have free reign. Again, going back to sort of, they ultimately know their bodies. Maybe they don't have a perfect gauge of how they're feeling, but it's certainly better than what I could come up with. So it becomes sort of a collaborative effort of, I will come up with the blueprint of, look, here's what I think we should do. This is the volume for a high minute getter. This is the volume for a rotation player. This is the volume for a non-starter. And then most people will gravitate towards whatever I suggest. But there's always going to be some people that are like, nah, I'm used to feeling beat up. I'm good. I want to keep training. Yeah. Or a 60-minute guy that's like, dude, like, is there any chance that I could just stretch today or something like that? And so the blueprint will handle the overwhelming majority of the decisions, and it usually, is the right one. So much so that however many case-by-case basis ones I have to handle, it's very manageable. And so I will handle it case by case. Like, hey, let's just you and me talk real quick for 15 seconds and figure out what you should do today.
Yeah, that's awesome. Man, I got to tell you, this has been very eye-opening, revealing. And I think the audience will feel the same way, because mainly personal trainers, they're not training athletes, they're training general population, but taking this information and applying some of it to your general exerciser. Conor, thank you so much for giving me some of your time today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it as well.
Yeah. So if you have anything, we'll put it in the show notes, some of your information. But if you have some other information of how you'd like people to learn more about you and the things you talk about, just please share away.
Sure. So I'm the director of sports performance at Flagler College. We're Division II school in St. Augustine, Florida. That's obviously where I live up in Jacksonville, but that's where I am. I own my own business called Get Strong Performance, 2 T's, GETT, Strong Performance. With that we work specifically with high school kids. So we'll do it on either an individual basis, a small group basis. What we're really leaning into is sort of remote team coaching. And there is, call it concierge, maybe, if you will. Like, we will come to you. So there's a number of high schools in the area that we, are in the middle of developing relationships with. And it's, okay, you guys have a weight room at your high school. Everybody, your whole team is already there because they're in class. Okay, we'll come to you guys right after school and just train you at your own weight room. So it's a bit of a unique service in that instead of saying, hey, you guys all individually drive to us, it's you guys stay there and let us come to you. So, that's something that we're trying to expand on and offer to St. Johns County and Duval County high schools. But again, we do our individual training or group training as well. If somebody is so compelled that they want to, work with me or work with us. So if somebody wants to contact me, the social media would be Instagram at Get Strong Performance, 2 T's. That's probably the best way to get a hold of me. You're welcome to send me an email. You can find me on the Flagler Athletic Staff Directory, Gettemy at flagler.edu. I would give my phone number out, but I don't mind, but my wife probably would. So if you're so compelled to talk to me, shoot me an email, send me a DM, and we'll go from there.
That's awesome. By the way, I love that idea of you going to high schools to do that. What a great idea. That's awesome, man. Definitely supportive of that. Thank you again for being on and for this awesome conversation. Have a good one, man.
You as well. Thank you.